Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I know that I'm pretty late to the party when it comes to this opinion piece that was in the New York Times, but I wanted to go over it with you. I was hoping to get to it at some point because it really goes against everything that I believe in and everything that I talk about on my channel. To me, it is extremely important that people know how to do their own research, that they know how to make common sense decisions over the information that they find. And what we're finding is that the elite don't want us going down those rabbit holes, so to speak. And the question that I have to ask is why? Why don't they want us going down the rabbit holes? Why do they want the mainstream populace not do their critical thinking? So let's read this. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, isn't helping in the fight against misinformation. First of all, I have to say that although the schools pay lip service to critical thinking skills, they're not actually teaching them. And I think that most people know that. The schools are giving a very one-sided look at topics and events to the school students, and that is not critical thinking. When it comes to critical thinking, you have to be willing to look at both sides of a topic. So really, although even in this byline here, he's saying that people are taught how to do critical thinking, they're not. It honestly is only a skill that you are going to develop if you yourself want to do it. I'm not going to read the whole article because it's pretty long, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the sort of how these people really feel about us. You know, the sheep, the ones that we're not supposed to worry about doing our own thinking because they'll do our thinking for us. And that is really that's the idea that I get, the gist of what he's talking about here. So let's just read it. For an academic, Michael Caulfield has an odd request. Stop overthinking what you see online. So that's exactly what I was talking about. Don't think, we'll think for you. Mr. Caulfield, a digital literacy expert at Washington State University, Vancouver, knows all too well that at this very moment, more people are fighting for the opportunity to lie to you than at perhaps any other point in human history. I have to say that I agree with him there, although I'm pretty sure that the people that he thinks are lying and the people that I think are lying are not the same people, but let's move on. Misinformation rides the greased algorithmic rails of powerful social media platforms and travels at velocities and in volumes that make it nearly impossible to stop. That alone makes information warfare an unfair fight for the average internet user. All right, so stopping there again, now you can see why I'm not going to read the whole article because I would be here forever. But he says that misinformation rides the greased algorithmic rails of powerful social media platforms and travels at velocities nearly impossible to stop. Well, what exactly is it that you are seeing on the social media platforms being pushed? What I see is that what the mainstream labels misinformation is censored. It's banned, hidden, suppressed. So if we want to talk about any sort of misinformation that is traveling, at velocities and in volumes that are nearly impossible to stop, well, the only thing that I see being pushed on us via social media are the mainstream ideas, the mainstream views, the narrative. So I don't know. It's pretty interesting that he says that. But anyway, I don't think that's what he means. But I'm going to just repeat this last sentence that I read. That alone makes information warfare an unfair fight for the average internet user. So once again, he doesn't think that we are intelligent enough to make our own decisions or to be able to weigh what information is factual and what is not. Back to the old mantra of don't think, we'll think for you. But Mr. Caulfield argues that the deck is stacked even further against us, that the way we're taught from a young age to evaluate and think critically about information is fundamentally flawed and out of step with the chaos of the current internet. We're taught that in order to protect ourselves from bad information, we need to deeply engage with the stuff that washes up in front of us, Mr. Caulfield told me recently. He suggested that the dominant mode of media literacy, if kids get taught any at all, is that you'll get imperfect information and then use reasoning to fix that somehow. But in reality, that strategy can completely backfire. In other words, resist the lure of rabbit holes, in part by reimagining media literacy for the internet hellscape we occupy. So yeah, do you hear that? Resist the lure of rabbit holes. They don't want you going down and doing your own research and finding out things that might not be very convenient for them. It's often counterproductive to engage directly with content from an unknown source, which makes me laugh because how often does the mainstream media tell us that an unnamed source said this? It was usually about President Trump. An unnamed source said this about President Trump, or a confidant said this about someone else. So all we're constantly getting are unnamed sources from mainstream media, but they're telling us here that it's counterproductive. So, hey, I'm fine with that. If they want to give unknown sources, I'm totally fine with not listening what they have to say. Anyway, and people can be led astray by false information. Again, you're not smart enough to make that determination yourself. Influenced by the research of Sam Weinberg, a professor at Stanford, there we see the elite, and Sarah McGrew, an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Mr. Caulfield argued that the best way to learn about a source of information is to leave it and look elsewhere, a concept called lateral reading. So again, if you are looking into something that does not follow the mainstream narrative, drop it and go somewhere else. That's their point of view. For instance, imagine you were to visit Stormfront. I'm not even going to say any of this because the algorithm will probably get me, but we'll just say a message board to try to understand claims in order to debunk them. Even if you see through the horrible rhetoric, at the end of the day, you gave that place however many minutes of your time. I find it interesting that they're constantly going on to, I'm just going to say it because you're not going to understand it, so whatever. They bring white supremacy into everything. They kind of make that the boogeyman of everything. And yes, it is certainly a bad thing, but I don't think that it's as prevalent as they make it out to be. So what they are doing is they are trying to equate that sort of ideology with going down rabbit holes. And honestly, they're just not the same thing. What they're just trying to do is they're trying to make those who are doing their own research, those that they would call conspiracy theorists, they're trying to make them look like they are on the side of the other people. And they're trying to just basically take away any credibility. So let's just continue down this way, though. The goal of disinformation is to capture attention, and critical thinking is deep attention. People learn to think critically by focusing on something and contemplating it deeply, to follow the information's logic and the inconsistencies. That natural human mindset is a liability in an attention economy. It allows grifters, conspiracy theorists, trolls, and savvy attention hijackers to take advantage of us and steal our focus. Well, I think we need to remember that it was the CIA who coined the term conspiracy theorist, and they use that term basically to get people to stop looking into things themselves, which is what the writer of this article is doing as well. Whenever you give your attention to a bad actor, you allow them to steal your attention from better treatments of an issue and give them the opportunity to warp your perspective. One way to combat this dynamic is to change how we teach media literacy. Internet users need to learn that our attention is a scarce commodity that is to be spent wisely. In 2016, Mr. Caulfield met Mr. Weinberg, who suggested modeling the process after the way professional fact checkers assess information. Here we go, those fact checkers that no one else is allowed to fact check. So they have no accountability. And just, on my own little rabbit trail, something that they wouldn't want you to do, I want you to just look up who funds these fact checkers. I think that you will find some very interesting information. You might run across people like Bill Gates, George Soros. You might find out that companies like Facebook are funding them, Google. Yeah, lots of really interesting stuff when you do your own research. I think that I might be finally realizing why it is that they don't want us to do that. All right, Mr. Caulfield refined the practice into 4 simple principles. Stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context, otherwise known as SIFT. So what I've got to say is investigate the source. That is very interesting because what they are considering to be reliable sources, what we are finding out more and more often lately is that they are not reliable sources. And in fact, as I mentioned before, they are the ones who are constantly using unnamed sources in their stories. But then we're supposed to circle around and we're supposed to use them as the reliable sources. Do you see where this is going? It's just a never-ending circle. And they're hoping, those people who don't care about critical thinking will never realize that. Okay. Mr. Caulfield walked me through the process using an Instagram post from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent anti-V activist, falsely alleging a link between the human papillomavirus vaccine and cancer. If this is not a claim where I have a depth of understanding, then I want to stop for a second and, before going further, just investigate the source, Mr. Caulfield said. He copied Mr. Kennedy's name in the Instagram post and popped it into Google. Look how fast this is, he told me, as he counted the seconds out loud. In 15 seconds, he navigated to Wikipedia. Yeah, before we were always told not to use Wikipedia as a source, but now it's totally fine. But anyway, moving on. And scrolled through the introductory section of the page, highlighting with his cursor the last sentence, which reads that Mr. Kennedy is an anti-V activist and a conspiracy theorist. I don't know if you know anything about Wikipedia, but people can just randomly go on there and edit different pages. And again, we were always told for years that Wikipedia was not a source. You couldn't use it as an actual source because people can go on there. And even if you go on Wikipedia, you will see that there's like the little edit mark up in the bottom that you can click on and edit things. I think that now they made it so that you have to have access to do that. But people can go on there and change that. So someone went on there and used their opinion to call Robert F. Kennedy an anti-V activist and a conspiracy theorist. And that's what we're supposed to use as reliable information to know that he's not someone that you should listen to? I don't know. I just don't know. Anyway, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the best unbiased source on information about that? I'd argue no. And that's good enough to know we should probably just move on, he said. That's right, folks, because someone on Wikipedia decided to call him that. He probed deeper into the method to find better coverage by copying the main claim in Mr. Kennedy's post and pasting that into a Google search. The first 2 results came from Agence France Presse's fact checkers again, Anyway, the fact check website, I would like to know how it is that they become reliable sources. Because really, I think that it was really graceful, the channel Really Graceful. She did a great video on fact checkers and where they come from. And I think that it was specifically Snopes in the video that I talked about. But yeah, they have like no accountability. Yet we're supposed to look to them as the ultimate in truth. Okay, anyway, he said his quick searches showed a pattern. Mr. Kennedy's claims were outside the consensus, a sign they were motivated by something other than science. So you see what's going on here. So if something is outside the consensus, that automatically means if it does not follow the mainstream narrative, oh, nope, forget it. It doesn't follow science. This is why they don't want you looking into things yourself. They don't want you to know the truth. They have a really good soldiers out there who are faithfully repeating what it is that they want you, what they want you to think. But then there are those of us who actually don't believe everything that we hear. And what we're finding is that what we're being told is the truth is not in fact the truth. So I'm not going to continue going on anymore because, as you can see, this is a pretty long article. But, I'm going to link it in the description box. But it's just getting to the point where it's ridiculous. They don't even care anymore. They will come right out and they will insinuate that we are not smart enough to find our own information, make our own judgments. They talk about how it's important to teach critical thinking skills in school, again, which they don't. But then when it comes down to it, we're not supposed to use it. We're supposed to be good little soldiers, and we're supposed to do what our masters tell us. That's all that I have for you today. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one here or over on Instagram or on my YouTube community page. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.